You're on the air with Florenza, your podcast destination for authentic conversations with a twist. So, grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and join me on this unique literary journey. Cheers!
Where shadows linger and stardust speaks, every tale blooms in the lavender hush of twilight. Today I'm thrilled to welcome Alfred P. Doblin, an author who masterfully blends lyrical prose and poignant storytelling. His debut, Tales of the Lavender Twilight, invites readers into a world where memory, longing, and self-discovery glow softly against the fading light of day. Please put your hands together and welcome Alfred to the show. Thank you so much, Alfred, for joining me on this episode on the air with Florenza, where in just a few minutes we are going to discuss your so good book, Tales of the Lavender Twilight. But before we do, we're going to toast to an amazing show. And I've been on vacation and am still in the vacation vibe. So this is a little vodka and peach flavored soda water. And what do you have?
This is just a little coffee. It's a little Green Mountain coffee with a little skim milk and a little sweet and low. So
Well,
it's
here you go. Cheers. Ooh. I stepped on a scale, and let me tell you, I need to cut back on everything but air. I had a great time on my vacation.
yeah, I guess I feel like I should say I stepped on the scale and unfortunately I didn't kill it.
I probably should have. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about your book, Tales of the Lavender Twilight. And when you tell us about yourself, tell us the juicy stuff that most people just may not necessarily know about Alfred P.
Well, I don't think other than a small group of people in New York, New Jersey, they don't know about me one way or another. So whatever I say, I think it's probably new. I spent a good part of my life as a journalist, and a chunk of that, I was the editorial page editor of the Bergen Record in New Jersey. So a lot of people know me for covering a lot of politics. I was very visible. I was in that job for almost 20 years between their smaller paper and their larger paper. And I was out, I was involved in, LGBTQIA plus organizations. So I think people who sort of knew me knew that I was out, but I wasn't writing, fiction, and I wasn't writing things that were, funny. So I think a lot of people who knew me in that context are kind of surprised, oh, you write fiction, you write these people. People who know me from a journalism background don't know that I have a BFA in music, and in voice. And I have a good friend, someone who is a character in the book, who says that I use show tune references too much, and I feel like nobody can use show tune references too much. It's not like salt, it's not going to raise your blood pressure or something. And I'm a very musically focused person. I write, the book is a collection of short stories, but it's actually the way, as I put the stories together, it's kind of programmed like a concert. Mm-hmm. That I wanted a piece that's slow, like an adagio, to be followed by something that's very fun, that might be like an allegretto, or there would be something that would be an andante, and there would be something that would be a lento, that we'd be playing around with mood and tempo, even though I'm writing.
Okay.
So music is very, very, very important to me. It's not in, I don't think it's in anything in this collection. At some point, it will be in something I write. I've become very gym focused in my later years, and I'm not dating a guy named James, So and I'm not the typical athletic kind of guy. Not yet. But I'm not the typical athletic kind of guy. I fit kind of the stereotypical don't know he's gay and as a little boy in the 60s and the early 70s. I like my parents took me to the theater. I grew up in New York. So I fit that kind of trope. But in my 40s, I started getting into going to a gym, and I ran. I did a lot of marathons. Now I don't have a lot of cartilage in my left knee, so there are no more marathons. But I was an avid runner, for a chunk of time. I did 10 marathons, but there are no runners in the book or in anything I've written at the moment. And I don't know why. Maybe I just don't find that no one's going to laugh out loud about a runner. And if I made you cry, I'd probably still cry in myself, but I'm not looking to do that. I'm a very, about 10 years of my journalism career was spent working in Catholic media, which is an interesting period of time. And I came out during the time that I was doing that, which is a very odd. It's odd, and it's not, because so many of the people that work within the Catholic Church, are gay. So I'm not really an active Catholic anymore, but I'm not a hostile Catholic either. Even though there are stories. There's these closeted priests, and there's one that gets what he deserves in a very funny story. But a lot of it, particularly the first story, which is called Holy Communion, is grounded in the sense of the community and the fellowship that many people do find in a worship environment, in a faith community, whether it's Catholic, whether it's Episcopal, whether it's many other faiths. And it doesn't need to be a religion, but many people do find that sense of community within religion. That's important to me. So I think those things, I don't know if people all put that all together when they think of me. I'm more liberal than some people think, and I'm more conservative than some people think. I don't easily, I think, line up, but I'm as formal as people think.
Nice. And that leads us right into the first question. So thank you for that. Tales of Lavender Twilight isn't just a collection. It really is a community. What inspired you to center your debut around a web of older gay men?
Well, I believe in authenticity, so, look at me, it's not like I'm going to pull off a mask, and I'm like Timothy Chalamet, but you could call me by his name. But the universe that I populate, are filled with men of my age. And most of them, are, they're not people that were clubbing in the 80s and the 90s. A lot of them are couples, which I'm not at the moment. But I felt that there isn't a lot of focus on people my age. And that's true even even if you're not gay or queer. I think even in the straight world, people who are in their late, who are in their late-ish 60s. Notice how I wasn't comfortable quite saying late 60s, but it is kind of late 60s. We're not dead yet. We're not gone. We're still very active, and there's a need, I think, to talk about that. And one of the things that's, I think, unique about gay men of my generation is that so many of them didn't make it to their 60s. So that the herd that should have gotten to the same age I am was sort of culled, by this horrible plague, of HIV/AIDS, and that sort of works a bit in some of the stories as well, because they're dealing with that sense of, well, there are fewer of us than there should have been. The men. And I'm using gay men specifically at the moment. I'm not trying to offend anybody in the bigger umbrella. Absolutely. But like a gay man today who's 25, unless something horrible happens, which I hope doesn't, there will be pretty much the large cohort of those men of 25 who will be around in 65. But that isn't true for my generation very specifically. And I think that colors, what we see. And so that's really this was the age I felt needed, I can talk about.
Yeah. And it's so true. I was speaking with another author, and her name escapes me, and it'll come to me. But the characters in her book are, 60-year-old couples. And she was saying, she looked around at all of her friends sitting around at the table, and it was just this realization that there were like no books that featured them as main characters. I want to go back to your opening and the fact that for decades you wrote nonfiction and then transitioned into the fiction space. What was that transition like for you? And was it easier than you anticipated or more difficult than you anticipated?
Um, well, I did, even though I never got anything published, I have been writing fiction for a while.
Okay.
When I was in my 20s, I had, a very funny kind of spoof of a detective novel. I had an agent, I envisioned like, oh, it's all going to happen. And I was like about 25 or something, and, it didn't, the book didn't find a house. The agent dropped me, and I just sort of focused on, on other stuff. I was an editorial page writer and an opinion writer. Okay. So I wrote a twice a week column. And so I still had to be fact-based, clearly. Right. And yes. The editorials had they were the voice of the institution. There's a freedom in fiction that clearly you don't have if you're working at a newspaper, mm-hmm. where there are guardrails you have to stay in, and even if you're writing an opinion column, you have to be clear everything is based on fact, at least yes. in the universe I worked in.
Right.
And in fiction, you don't necessarily have to be as fact-based. Although I think most of what I write, other than I have a story that's from the perspective of the gay Cocker Spaniel, that little thing aside, are kind of factually accurate. Yes. I'm not trying to change the universe in which people are moving in, but it's I think working at a daily newspaper with those kinds of deadlines and you have to produce things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I didn't have to necessarily write something every day because I ran the opinion desk. So I probably wrote things maybe 4 times a week.
Okay.
In terms of when I was writing editorials and columns, but you have a certain discipline, because if I wasn't writing, I was also editing the people on my staff, and you have to work with people and work with stuff. So I think it also sharpens your understanding of how something's going to read.
Yes.
And I do think the other thing about working in a newspaper, which was a hard thing for me to get comfortable with, particularly as an opinion writer, if somebody's back reading you, yes. like on the mm-hmm. copy desk, and they don't get something you wrote, your first thing is, and it's like, what do you know? But then you sort of recognize that if the reader can't understand what you yeah. wrote, it's your problem. It's
Correct.
Not their problem. Because
Correct.
If you want them to understand a thought, a concept, what someone is saying, you shouldn't be focused on, I can be smarter than you. Yeah. I don't want yeah. somebody to need to take out a dictionary to read what I've written, yeah. and they won't.
Yeah.
So I think that has helped me in the fiction, even though I may have show tune references. I make a point of then trying to explain somewhere quickly, like where it came from.
Yes.
In a way that sounds sort of organic, but that everything can't be an inside
yes.
joke or an inside mm-hmm. quip to 12 people.
Yes. I love that. When I was in a classroom, I had a saying that was over the door when the students entered. And essentially it was, for me, if a child can't learn the way we teach, then we need to teach the way the child can learn and not put that onus on, as you were saying, the reader. Your stories touch on grief, aging, companionship, and chosen family. Was there one story that poured out of you faster than the others?
Some were written very quickly, and a couple of them were silly ones, where I just felt I needed something silly, and the idea just sort of clicked. There's a thing with the Laird and Mildred Pierce that wrote probably in a day and a half, if it took even that long, because I wanted to take a character, John, who is the sexiest character in the book. So just, he's the one I want to be in the car with.
In the car with John!
Who I've never, I don't have a specific, he's based on a compilation of people. But the first story, Holy Communion, wrote pretty easily. I mean, I tinkered with it a bit, but it wasn't a difficult story to write. Like the biggest story in the collection, Mr. Picky Comes to Town, which has a lot of it has a lot of my emotions in it. You know, it's inspired by somebody who, you know, is a very close person in my life. That wasn't a fast story because it sort of evolved differently than I thought, you know, and that it ended up sort of being like a story with very specific sections. Like there's kind of a, an introduction and then a main thing and then an epilogue. I think Holy Communion out of the story probably came together rather well and quickly.
Nice. What was your thought process and how you arranged the stories themselves? Did you have like because we reference music, was it like musically set that way to where you wanted the reader to have this experience that required that the stories align a certain way? Or was it like spaghetti? You just toss it against the wall and say whatever sticks, sticks.
It's very much the former. I mean, they weren't written sequentially. I don't know if anybody, I don't know how people who who write short story, things that become short story collections. I would assume their process is similar to mine in that, you've written a short story and then you write another short story. And then I started realizing there were connected threads to them. There were Holy Communion and Thanksgiving were probably, I think I wrote Thanksgiving and then I wrote Holy Communion. So I wrote the last story, what would become the last story, and then I deliberately wrote Holy Communion to be a bookend.
Okay.
That I wanted it to in some ways be the same thing that it's about death, but in one story it ends sadly, and in the other it ends very hopefully. Because it was very important to me that by the time you get to the end, there's this sense of hope. It's a struggle, but it's not a downer in that way. As some of the stories fell into place, then I started looking at, well, how do these line up? What's missing? And then like the Laird and Mrs. Pierce, Mildred Pierce, I realized I needed a funny. There needed to be something that was like a scherzo, music. It needed to be funny and it needed to be fast. And I also wanted to make a comment about this character who you saw in another story, very, very sad, that he's starting to move on. So that the stories all work independently of each other. But if you read them sequentially, there'll be things that'll be very sad, and there'll be things that are a hoot. There's characters in The Dog Pimp of Columbia Heights, that are very central to that story. And they're this tiny, tiny cameo in this other story further on that's set in Los Angeles. And it's a hoot, because if you've read all these stories, because while this little piece is kind of funny unto itself, if you were seeing this filmed, by like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon, if you're listening, you would go like, oh, like that's them, and so I wanted that little piece in there as well. But there's a rhythm to it. I don't want you to be depressed for 5 stories in a row. I want you, and I also don't want you to be challenged in that way, because I think you'd put down the book.
Excellent. Thank you. Many of your characters are navigating invisibility in a world obsessed with youth. What do you think mainstream literature is still missing when it comes to aging and queer identity?
Honestly, I would say I don't know. Because I don't, I'm kind of lost in the 19th century from my reading habits. I mean, I really like character-rich period pieces. I mean, that were actually written in the period, so they're not trying to be period. Dickens, they didn't have showers back then. That's just the way it was. I think as a gay older white male, my community that I have seen in the bars that I would go to and places I would go to, are still somewhat overly white.
Mm-hmm.
There's not lots of faces of color. There are some,
Yeah.
much more than there were 20 years ago, but there isn't a lot of diversity within the queer community.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still too youth focused. I don't know, why. I mean, our culture is somewhat youth focused. Yeah. I can't think of, many books I've read that are current, that are focused on older people, and maybe it's just that it's challenging. I mean, it's one, as an older person starting out trying to make some kind of splash as a writer, as a novelist. It's not a sexy road that I'm choosing.
Yeah.
And that may be part of why it's hard to get people to buy books.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I love that. And
put
that up again. Let's see. You know what? Subconsciously, I came ready.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Now, talk to me about that title.
Well, I fell in love with the phrase. I mean, as I started putting it together, I was like, okay, I wanted tales of something because they're short stories, and I just somehow or other aligned on this idea of the Lavender Twilight, because it spoke of the color that's used a lot to represent gay and queer people, but it also, I mean, I can see it. I'm actually very pleased with the book cover came out. It's a beautiful part of the day.
Yeah.
The Lavender Twilight. It is not the end of the day. It is not blackness. It isn't even quite that kind of glorious, kind of deep azure blue you get when all the the buildings, all the skyscrapers, sort of pop. Yeah. It's a little bit before that. It's somewhere between that little like egg yolk orange sun going down. Yeah. If you've ever been like Key West and watch the sun go down in Mallory Square, and the sky just gets this glorious color that is, to me, a celebration of the day that's coming to an end, with a little bit of the excitement of the evening ahead. It's not the ending, but it's not the beginning
either. Love that. Ooh, I love that. Very poetic, my friend. Very poetic.
Oh, well, maybe I'll try writing.
Yes. Is there a character you wish you had more time with, or one who surprised you by demanding the spotlight?
Ooh. Well, the bartender John, I think, fits both.
Okay.
Because he didn't start out to be as important. That story began with the idea that it's about someone who died, this guy Davy, who is important in many of the stories because people have known him, but he's dead. You never meet him. I thought about writing a scene somewhere where he's alive chatting with someone, and I thought, no, that gets in the way. I don't want people to have an opinion of, I want them to imagine him however he'd be. But the bartender became more assertive as a character. That it wasn't going to be about this, just the people coming into the bar remembering this person. And there are people I've seen in bars, like there's a very sad man, Tommy, who's an alcoholic, who has this little moment. It was modeled on somebody I used to see in a bar that was always there, when he smelled of the alcohol and he was lost in his sad little world. But John became real in a way, in a very demanding way. I mean, a lot of the characters are very real to me, but this particular person, I'm not done with him yet.
Yeah.
I mean, and he'll be in other stories because I think he, at some point, needs more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love exactly what you're asking.
Yeah. And I love that our characters, to non-writers, they don't understand how our characters like manifest and speak and demand our attention. And they know how to show up in the most inappropriate times to, demanding to be heard. So I love that. Last question. Los Angeles and New York are practically characters in their own right. What drew you to set your stories in these particular cities?
Well, I live in New York. I grew up on Long Island. I lived in Los Angeles for 4 years in the early '90s. I go back every. I just came back actually a week ago. I mean, my closest, certainly my closest gay friends are in Los Angeles, or in that vicinity. Um, and I'm a city person for the most part. Although one of the stories goes up to the Catskills. Mr. Picky comes to town because I worked in the Catskills as a singer out of college, so I sort of know the Catskills. Um, I could go into like a show tune, like Leonard Bernstein, it's a lonely town. There's a song from uh, on the town called Lonely Town. But I think cities are interesting places, Los Angeles and New York, because they're they seem as if they're impossible to navigate, and yet when you learn how to navigate them, you navigate them in very
Yeah.
small little sections.
Uh-huh.
They really are like little towns within New
Within.
York that you could be, sort of like Los Angeles. If you lived in Larchmont Village, it's its own little community. If you lived in Westwood, it's own little community. It's not so much the overall. So I kind of like the idea of these people forming these relationships and friends and building their lives in places that seem challenging because they are.
Yeah.
But if you find your neighborhood, and whether it's a bar, and for a lot of gay men that is where they go, you do find your neighborhood, and you do find your community. I think it's stronger in a big place than it would be saying like somebody found their community in like Grover's Corners, where you were going for that little town.
Nice. Where are the listeners able to learn more about Alfred P and what you're up to? Do you have a website? Are you on a social media? Where might they locate you?
Well, I still have not. I need to set up a website. I have been lectured about that, but I'm slow on that. I've just started using a little bit of Blue
Blue
Sky.
Sky. Mm-hmm.
I just feel like it's supposed to go into a song, Blue Sky. But I'm still more on X.
Okay.
Because I have more followers on X.
Yeah.
I don't. I wish it was still Twitter because I like to want to say you tweet and you don't X. You
don't.
post.
Yes.
And post seems
so boring.
Yeah, it does. So I X tweet. I guess it makes it sound like a former boyfriend or something. My X tweet. I X tweet a lot.
My post formerly known as Twitter. Tweets.
Oh, I like that. And I could even do like a purple rain, because it goes to the cover of the book, which people should buy. But that's what I'm, right now I'm doing. I've been doing some podcasts where they pop up. I need to sort of figure out, to find, bookstores, little bookstores that might want to say like, would you like me to read? And maybe even not just sit there and read out loud to people, who might buy the book.
Yes.
So I have to become a little more aggressive in that way. But I would say if people, looked, on X, they would find me. Okay. Right now, I'm more other than when I'm tweeting out, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. It's like I try to be. I don't want to be political at this particular moment. So like I went to see Sunset Boulevard the other day and finally got to see that. So I tweeted out, my. I'm sorry, the site for I posted on the site formerly known as whatever. What I thought of it. So that's where you can find it.
Yeah, nice. Now we've come to the portion of our show that I call Last Call. And so go ahead and take a sip. Or in my case, a gulp. I have a few random questions, so we may get to all 5, or we may just dive into 3 of them. And they're not designed for like for you to have to really think hard, just more so like what is that thing that comes to mind. So, this one's going to be fun. So it may take a little thought. This one is 2 true, 1 false. Share 3 things about yourself. 2 are real and 1 is made up. And let me see if I can guess the 5th. And it can just be like quick things about you. 2 real, 1 false.
Okay. I've run 10 marathons.
Okay.
I have sung at Lincoln Center, and I think of another thing that could sound fabulous, whether it's true or not. And I've driven a motorcycle.
You took longer with the motorcycle, so part of me thinks that's false, but I also think you've run more than 10 marathons. So I'm going to say 10 marathons is the false.
It was the motorcycle that was false. I did 10. 10 was a lot. Then my cartilage went out. From like 45 to 55, I did one a year.
Okay, all right. If a reader finished your book and could only take away one feeling or thought, what one feeling or thought would you want them to have?
People matter.
Ooh, yes. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yes. What's something your characters would say about you behind your back if they met at happy hour?
He doesn't know when to stop talking.
I like that. Tell us something the bio doesn't, a random hobby, an unexpected love, or a past job that helped shape your storytelling.
I love cooking.
Ooh.
And I'm a very mise en place kind of cook. So I like to sort of know what, if I'm doing a recipe, I like to know what I'm about to do. I like to have a sense of, do I have everything I need? And then I do it.
Nice. What's your favorite dish to prepare?
Actually, it's not complicated. My favorite dish is roast chicken. Love me a roast chicken.
Okay. Now, is there a secret to getting it just right?
I don't. Well, actually, I had a chef at a restaurant I used to go to all the time. They told me I used to make a fabulous roast chicken, but he told me how to up that fabulousness one more time. And it was to shove cut up an orange into the cavity. Don't use onions or lemons, but use an orange. And I found using a blood orange is even better because the au jus just gets this lovely color. But the orange does something.
Okay.
So that's what I would say. You have to just cook chicken with love.
You do. You have to cook everything with love. Oh my gosh, you can tell the difference. You can absolutely. We were at a restaurant, my husband and I love looking for these hole in the walls, right? Like these just unusual mom and pops. And we found one very close to our neighborhood. And we were like, how did we never see this little place over here? And it's in a strip mall, which I normally never do. But we went in and it's just this tiny little thing. I mean, absolutely tiny. That food was cooked with so much love. The owner is always on site. And we called him over and I told him, I said, everything on this plate has been cooked with love. And he said to me, he said, that is the best compliment I have ever received. So he calls over all the chefs in the back and they're just glowing. And he says, believe it or not, that's what I tell them every single day. I don't care what you do, just make sure you are preparing people's food with love. So I agree with that. So thank you, Alfred, for joining me. This has been so much fun.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed it as well.
Yes.
And this wraps up another episode of On the Air with Florenza. You may follow me on all social media platforms under Florenza Lee or via my website at florenza.org. Until next time, cheers.